The notification came at 4:47 in the morning, and it woke Daniel Reyes not with a sound but with the sustained vibration of his phone against the kitchen table where he'd fallen asleep, head on his forearm, with the laptop still open and the code editor still running. He was 40 years old. He was a single father. He had been awake since the previous afternoon, and he had been building something for 14 months. And at 4:47 in the morning in a kitchen in Aurora, Colorado, something had happened. He picked up the phone without fully waking. He squinted at the screen. The notification was from the App Store, the kind of aggregate alert that rolled up download counts into a single number when individual notifications became too frequent to be useful. The number was not a number he had seen directed at anything he had built before. He sat up straight. He looked at the number again. He put the phone down, pressed both palms flat against the table, and breathed. Then he picked the phone up and looked at the number again, because he was a methodical person, and methodical people verify. It was real. He got up and went to the hallway and stood outside the closed door of his daughter's room for a moment. He could hear her breathing, the slow, steady breathing of a 12-year-old who slept the way children sleep when they feel safe, which was the only thing he had ever wanted to give her and the thing that had made every decision of the last 4 years make sense. He went back to the kitchen. He made coffee. He sat down in front of the laptop and looked at what 14 months of nights and early mornings and weekends and a persistent refusal to believe that the idea was too small had made. He thought about the Tuesday 4 years ago when his wife had said she was leaving. Not leaving him, leaving the country, for a job in Singapore that she had wanted for longer than she'd told him, with a person she had known for longer than she'd told him. She had been kind about it, in the way people are kind when they have made a final decision and feel guilty about it. She had told him he was a good man. She had told him she was sorry. She had told him that Sophia would be fine. Sophia was 8 at the time. He had stood in the kitchen. This kitchen, the same yellow linoleum, the same coffee maker with the burned plastic smell on the back left burner. And he had thought about several things simultaneously, the way shock makes your mind fractal and wide. He had thought about Sophia. He had thought about his job, which was a mid-level software developer position at a logistics company in Denver that paid decently and demanded exactly nothing of his imagination. He had thought about the fact that he was now, at 36, going to be doing this alone. He had gone into Sophia's room that night after she was asleep, and he had sat in the chair he kept in the corner, and he had made himself a promise. Not a dramatic promise. Not the kind of thing you say out loud in movies. A quiet one. The kind you make to yourself in the dark when you understand what is being asked of you. He was going to be enough. Not perfect. Not everything. Enough. What followed was 4 years of the particular mathematics of single parenthood. The calculation that never stops running in the background of every decision. The constant triangulation of time and money and energy and presence. He dropped Sophia at school. He drove to the office. He did his work, which was competent and unremarkable because competent and unremarkable was what he had capacity for right now. He picked Sophia up. He made dinner. Actual dinner, because he believed that dinner mattered, that the act of a meal prepared and shared was a kind of architecture his daughter needed. He helped with homework. He read to her longer than she probably needed him to because he needed it. He put her to bed. Then he sat at the kitchen table and he worked on the thing. The thing had started as a practical problem. He was a software developer and the father of an 8-year-old, and he had no system for managing the invisible labor of the household. The appointments and permission slips and teacher contacts and allergy information and emergency protocols and medication schedules and all the 10,000 things that constitute the operational reality of raising a child. He had looked for an app that did what he needed. He had found apps that did pieces of it. Calendars, note-taking tools, contact managers, but nothing that held all of it in one place in a way that worked for a solo parent who was also working full-time and operating on insufficient sleep. So he built it himself. This was not, in the beginning, a plan to build a product. It was a plan to solve his own problem, which is how the best things start. He built the first version in about 3 weeks, using frameworks he knew from his day job and design principles he learned from reading, at night while Sophia slept. The first version was functional and ugly, and solved the problem for him specifically. He showed it to 2 other single parents he knew, a woman named Joanna, whose ex-husband was involved but unreliable, and a man named Tim, whose wife had died 2 years before. They used it for a week and came back with feedback that was both specific and emotional, in the way feedback from people who genuinely need something always is. "This," Joanna said, holding up her phone, "is the first time in 2 years I haven't had to hold the whole thing in my head." He built the second version, then the third, then the fourth. He named it Anchor, because that was what it was, a fixed point, something that didn't move, that everything else could be measured from. He released it quietly, 13 months after he started building it, with no marketing budget and no press outreach and no product launch strategy because he didn't have time for those things. He posted about it in 2 online forums for single parents, communities he'd been quietly reading for 3 years because they understood things he didn't know how to say out loud. He described the problem it solved and linked the download page. 300 people downloaded it in the first 2 days. Then one of those 300 wrote a review that described, in 3 paragraphs, what the app had done for her specific situation. She was a widow with 3 children. She worked nights. She had been drowning in the administrative weight of keeping her family running. And the review was specific and honest, and it said, at the end, "Someone built this for people like us. I don't know who. I'm grateful." The review was shared, and then shared again. And then a journalist at a parenting publication found it and wrote about Anchor. And then a larger publication picked up that piece. And then, on a Tuesday evening in March, a post from a single father in Australia, a firefighter named James, who had found the app through a Facebook group, went quietly viral, reaching through the invisible infrastructure of shared experience to parents on every continent who understood, in their bones, exactly what the problem was and exactly what it meant to have it solved. Daniel had gone to bed not knowing any of this was happening. He had woken up at 4:47 to a number on his phone that he had to look at twice. Tell us in the comments where in the world you are listening to this story from. If HeartLine Stories has moved you today, please like, subscribe, and share this channel. Every subscriber tells us to keep bringing stories like this. Now, back to Daniel and the morning that would change his life. By the time Sophia came into the kitchen at 6:30 in her school uniform, still trailing sleep, her hair needing attention, Daniel had read 47 emails, 2 interview requests, a message from a venture capital firm in San Francisco, and a message from a non-profit that worked with single parents asking if they could partner on distributing the app at no cost to families in financial need. He had responded to none of them. He made Sophia's breakfast first. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, the same breakfast they had every Thursday. She sat at the table with her backpack and she looked at him. The specific look that 12-year-olds develop when they are old enough to read their parents' face, and she said, "Dad, what happened?" "Something with the app," he said. "Good something or bad something." He thought about how to say it. He was not by nature an expressive man, not in the way of people who announce things. He was more the kind of person who sits with something until he understands it before he shares it. But Sophia was looking at him with those 12-year-old eyes that had watched him work on this for 14 months, had seen him at this table at midnight, had brought him glasses of water without being asked, had said once, with the solemn clarity that children sometimes produce, "I hope lots of people get to use it, Dad." And she deserved to know. "Good something," he said. "Really good." She reached across the table and put her hand over his. "I knew it would be," she said. With the absolute, uncomplicated certainty that is perhaps the most specific thing about being loved by a child. He drove her to school. He called his supervisor at the logistics company from the parking lot of the school and said he needed to take a personal day, which was the first personal day he had taken in 4 years. His supervisor said, "Fine, no problem. Take the time." He sat in the parking lot for a few minutes after the call, watching other parents in the drop-off line. Some of them single, he knew, some of them partnered, all of them in the particular suspended animation of the school day handoff. That moment when the morning's intensity pauses and you breathe and you go on with the rest of it. He thought about Joanna and Tim and the 300 people who had downloaded Anchor in the first 2 days, and the widow in her review who had written that someone built this for people like us. He had built it for himself. It had become something for everyone who shared the problem. This was how the best things worked. Not top-down, not designed from a distance, but from the inside of the need, by the person who understood it most specifically. He drove home. He sat at the kitchen table. He opened the laptop. He replied to the emails methodically, starting with the partnership nonprofit, which he answered yes to immediately and without conditions. He replied to the interview requests. He read the message from the venture capital firm with the careful attention of someone who has spent 4 years learning to protect what matters and understands that money, which solves some problems, creates others. He hired a lawyer 3 weeks later, a technology attorney in Denver whose fees were, for the first time in his life, something he could manage, and he had his first real conversation about what Anchor could be at scale. The venture firm came to Aurora. They sat at the kitchen table, the yellow linoleum, the coffee maker, and they talked for 4 hours, and what came out of it was a term sheet that Daniel read 3 times before signing, because he is methodical, and methodical people verify. He did not quit his job at the logistics company immediately. He gave 3 months' notice, which surprised his supervisor, who had expected him to leave the next day. He said he believed that professional commitments mattered, and that the people he'd worked with deserved transition time. His supervisor shook his hand and said he had never had an employee like Daniel, and probably never would again. Anchor became his full-time work at the start of the following year. He hired 2 engineers in January, a product designer in February. The nonprofit partnership had distributed the app to 12,000 families in financial hardship by March. He still made dinner every night, actual dinner. He still sat with Sophia and asked about her day and listened to the answer with the specific quality of attention that children remember. Not the performance of listening, but the thing itself. James, the firefighter from Australia, sent a message one afternoon that said he wanted to donate to whatever cause Daniel cared about most, because Anchor had given him his life back. Daniel wrote back and said the cause he cared about most was the nonprofit partnership, and here was the link. One evening that spring, Sophia came into the kitchen while Daniel was at the laptop. Not working now, just reading, and she sat across from him and said, "Dad, do you remember when you started building the app?" "Of course," he said. "I used to watch you from the hallway sometimes," she said. "When I couldn't sleep, you were always working, but you always looked like you were somewhere you were supposed to be." He looked at her. His daughter, who had watched him at this table in the middle of the night and brought him glasses of water and said, "I hope lots of people get to use it," who had put her hand on his and said, "I knew it would be good." "I was," he said. She nodded, satisfied, the way children are when the world confirms what they already understood. She went back to her room. He sat for a moment in the quiet of the kitchen, the yellow linoleum, the coffee maker, the table where it had all happened, and he thought about the Tuesday 4 years ago and the promise he had made in the dark. He had been enough. He had been more than enough. And the app he had built for himself in the hours between Sophia's bedtime and his own had become something that held 10,000 other families in their hardest hours the way he had needed to be held in his. That felt, he thought, like something worth waking up at 4:47. For, if this story moved you, if it reminded you that the thing you build for yourself might be exactly what the world needed, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have a story of your own, write to us at heartlinestories@gmail.com. Every heart has a story worth telling. This is HeartLine Stories, where yours matters.